When Blackbeard took Whitebeard's power, One Piece did something it loves to do to us. It cut away. We don't see the devil fruit leave the body, we don't see the transfer, we don't see the mechanism. Blackbeard covers Whitebeard's body completely, time passes, and when the cloth is lifted, the impossible has happened. He has Whitebeard's power, and the story simply moves on. One Piece usually explains its rules, but here it refuses to, which leaves a few basic questions hanging in the air. If devil fruit powers normally leave the body and reincarnate in a fruit elsewhere, how did Blackbeard intercept it? How did he get here first? And how can he wield more than one at a time? Across myth and folklore and real history, the answer is old, blunt, and uncomfortable. Power doesn't drift away on its own, it lives somewhere specific, and if you want to take that power before it escapes, you take the part of the body where the power is believed to reside. In myth, the heart is both functional anatomy as well as poetic symbolism. It's treated as the seat of memory, courage, identity, will, and divine favor. In ancient Egypt, the heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at because it carried the soul. A heart too heavy with desire or unresolved attachment would be destroyed outright. In Mesoamerican ritual, warriors consumed the hearts of their enemies to inherit their strength and vitality. In Norse and Celtic stories, eating the heart of a beast or a hero granted wisdom, fury, or prophetic insight. These traditions developed independently across cultures that never spoke to one another. The idea is consistent, though. Power doesn't linger in the air. Power moves through the flesh. Across myth and storytelling, fruit repeatedly appears as a stand-in for the heart and the soul, a way to make life, identity, and transformation tangible. From the forbidden fruit of Eden awakening human selfhood, to Persephone's pomegranate binding her heart to the underworld, to Norse gods sustaining their divinity through apples, fruit is never mere nourishment, but concentrated essence, something that carries fate once it's consumed. In Japanese tradition, the symbolism becomes exquisitely fragile. Sakura, cherry blossoms, embody mono no aware, the aching awareness that life's beauty exists precisely because it fades, while the red cherries echo blood, vitality, and the heart itself, life at its most ripe and most vulnerable. Together, these traditions frame fruit as the soul made visible and edible, a temporary vessel of inner truth that can be stolen, shared, or lost, and whose sweetness is inseparable from impermanence. Seen through that lens, Blackbeard's moment with Whitebeard gets dark. What happens under that cloth is hidden, but when it's removed, his power is gone, not reborn elsewhere, but taken, as if it never had a chance to leave. The most unsettling possibility is also the simplest. Blackbeard didn't wait for the devil fruit to leave. He took the power while it was still bound to the body. Blackbeard consumed Whitebeard's heart before it could escape. That explanation fits the scene disturbingly well. It explains why Blackbeard needed privacy, it explains why the transfer was immediate, and it explains why no fruit appears on screen. And it explains why the usual rules don't apply, because the rules were never about the fruit, they were about containers. Devil fruits are what power becomes after the body fails. Blackbeard skipped that step. We even have an example of this method of power transfer in One Piece already. Big Mom devoured Mother Carmel and obtained the Soru Soru no Mi, bearing a name which is yet another hint at the nature of this mechanic. And now let's reframe Blackbeard's consumption. One Piece presents this as a character flavor, but the series is rarely that casual. In myth, devourers are never satisfied because consumption isn't pleasure, it's maintenance. They eat because what they carry is unstable. They are insatiable. Blackbeard doesn't sleep, he doesn't rest, he consumes. The infamous cherry pie scene reads a lot differently in this light. Food isn't just comfort for Blackbeard, it's assertion. Power is not something he earns or cultivates, it's something he takes. Cherry pie just happens to be the least alarming example. To understand why Blackbeard survived something that should have killed him, we have to look at how devil fruits actually function in the story. One Piece has been pretty explicit in explaining that eating more than one devil fruit will tear a person apart. Devil fruits aren't just abilities, they carry will, and a desire, and a kind of internal momentum. Zoans resist control and seek their new users. Awakenings happen when a user's will aligns with the fruit's nature. When someone eats two devil fruits, the wills pull in opposite directions inside the same vessel, and the structure collapses. Blackbeard's Yami Yami no Mi changes that equation, though. His darkness isn't just a shadow or illusion, it's gravity, pulling things inwards. It absorbs devil fruit abilities directly, suppressing them by holding them in a state of forced containment. When Blackbeard touches another power, it doesn't clash with his own, it's swallowed, compressed, and muted. No other devil fruit behaves like this. The Yami Yami no Mi doesn't just negate power, it contains it. That makes Blackbeard's survival make more sense. If he consumed Whitebeard's heart while the power was still anchored to flesh, then the Yami Yami no Mi wouldn't be competing with the Gura Gura no Mi, it would be restraining it, holding its will inside a gravity well before it could assert itself fully. There's another layer to this too. What if the wills involved weren't fighting? What if destruction and darkness weren't in conflict at all? What if hunger recognized hunger? At that point, it's no longer two devil fruits tearing a soul apart, it's one appetite fed twice. The name itself feels intentional. Yami Yami, dark dark, spoken aloud, it almost sounds like yummy yummy. It's funny until you remember what we're talking about. Blackbeard doesn't just take power, he eats it. This idea locks into One Piece canon even more tightly when you consider what the story has already shown us about hearts and souls. During Punk Hazard, Trafalgar Law switches hearts between bodies. The result's not just a physical confusion, personalities shift entirely. Instincts, behaviors, and emotional responses move with the hearts. The bodies remain the same, but the people inside them change. One Piece makes this implication clear. Move the heart and you move the person. Later, Vegapunk confirms this on a global scale. In his broadcast, Vegapunk explains that consciousness, will, and identity are not abstract concepts. They exert pressure. They leave physical impressions. Souls can be stored, transferred, distorted, and lost. In One Piece, what people call a soul has weight. This, of course, is referencing the real-world experiments done by Duncan McDougall, in which he weighed the body of dying patients and posited, though inconclusively, that the soul weighs about 21 grams. In One Piece, this single idea reframes everything. Devil fruits aren't magical trinkets, they're condensed wills, heavy with desire, trying to anchor themselves to vessels long enough to bear them. It explains why awakenings require an alignment of will. It explains why stacking devil fruits normally destroys the user. The accumulated weight tears the soul apart from within the body. Kuma's power only makes sense when you stop thinking of it as removal and start thinking of it as storage. The pawpaw fruit allows him to push pain, memories, and suffering out of others, but that alone does not explain why the process works for him. Someone still has to bear the weight of the pain that's taken, and Kuma does this. His Buccaneer body seems to not just be resilient in the usual sense, it's built to contain. He absorbs agony that would break ordinary people, not because he lacks feeling, but because his body can hold it without rejecting it. The pain doesn't vanish, it's displaced, carried, and endured. And in that way, Kuma functions less like a healer and more as a vessel, one designed to accumulate suffering so others don't have to. In a world where souls have weight and memory leaves physical impressions, Kuma's body becomes proof that certain bodies are capable of holding more than one burden at a time. His ability transfers pain, but his body is what makes that transfer possible. There's a shared thread running through Rox D. Xebec, Marshall D. Teach, and Bartholomew Kuma that has less to do with ideology and more to do with physiology. Kuma's reveal as a Buccaneer reframes what the series means when it describes certain people as having different bodies. Buccaneers are shown to endure burdens that would destroy others, not only physical pain, but emotional and spiritual weight as well. Kuma's heart becomes a literal repository for the suffering of others, holding memories, pain, and will without losing cohesion. That same structural resilience appears in different forms, in Xebec and Blackbeard. Xebec was able to command powerful figures whose ambitions should have torn any other leader apart. In this way, Blackbeard can carry multiple devil fruits without his body collapsing under the strain. And taken together, these figures suggest the existence of bodies capable of housing more than a single will, hearts that can contain layered desires without immediate failure. In a world where souls have measurable weight and devil fruits are condensed in tension, that kind of body is not an anomaly, it's a vessel designed for accumulation. Long before Blackbeard stepped into history, there was Rox D. Xebec. His name is strange even by One Piece standards. Xebec's a real term for a fast, aggressive warship used for raids and ambushes. What matters most here is not just who Xebec commanded, but how. His crew was made up of incompatible wills. Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, figures who could barely coexist even in their own eras. And yet under Xebec they existed in the same orbit, not peacefully but coherently. That alone suggests something unusual about him, a gravitational presence strong enough to bind competing ambitions without dissolving them. It reflects the same structural abnormality that we now see associated with Blackbeard's body. This is where Whitebeard's dream becomes important. Whitebeard wanted a family. That desire defined him so completely that it shaped the way he lived, the way he ruled, and the way he died. At first glance, that dream seems diametrically opposed to Blackbeard's path, but One Piece quietly complicates that reading. We're shown Marshall D. Teach as a child, crying alone in the snow and the moonlight, a boy who'd already lost everything, whose father, Xebec, was killed in front of him, a boy whose entire family name was erased. Seen through that lens, Whitebeard's dream and Blackbeard's hunger don't exist on opposite sides of the story. They originate from the same wounds. Whitebeard responded to that wound by creating a family through protection and loyalty, but Blackbeard responds to it by building one through force, consumption, and gravity, pulling people, powers, and wills into himself so they can never leave him again. His methods are ruthless, but the desire beneath is recognizably human. This reframes the moment in Marineford in a way that's difficult to ignore. Blackbeard didn't just kill Whitebeard and take his power. He consumed the heart of a man whose dream mirrored his, in a weird, distorted kind of way. The desire to never be alone again, the desire to bind others so tightly that separation becomes impossible. In myth, that kind of inheritance isn't just symbolic, it's literal, and that will passes on with the flesh. Xebec becomes the missing link in this chain. If he was the first to test how many ambitions can be bound together without collapse, then Whitebeard represented one outcome of that inheritance, and Blackbeard represents another. One tried to give himself away to form a family, the other takes everything inside himself to ensure he can never lose one again. It doesn't make Blackbeard misunderstood or justified, it makes him legible. And it makes the idea that he ate Whitebeard's heart feel less like an act of cruelty for its own sake, and more like the culmination of a lineage. Power, family, and will passed down not through blood or name, but through consumption. The real-world Blackbeard's identity, split across history by inconsistent records, is recombined in one piece through literal acts of devouring. Names that were once separate on paper are unified inside one body. Thatch dies so Teach can acquire darkness. Edward dies so Teach can acquire overwhelming power. It's no secret that Blackbeard is heavily associated with the number 3. The braids in his beard, his 3 flintlock pistols, his 3-skulled Jolly Roger. Across myth, splitting identity into 3 aspects is not about balance, it's about containment. 3 is the smallest number that allows contradiction to coexist without resolution. Hecate, in Greek mythology, appears as a triple-bodied goddess, ruling crossroads, thresholds, and liminal states. She's not divided because she's unstable, but because her domain cannot be approached from a single direction. Birth, death, and transition coexist within her. In Hindu cosmology, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva form the Trimurti. Creation, preservation, and destruction are separated because no single form can safely contain all 3 drives at once. Each god governs a phase of existence that would overwhelm a unified being. When these forces fall out of alignment, catastrophe follows. Even in Celtic myth, the Morrigan appears as a triple goddess of war, fate, and death. She doesn't act as one voice but a chorus. In each case, 3 is not harmony, it's a controlled fracture. And remember, Blackbeard doesn't sleep either. Throughout myths, sleep disruption appears alongside fractured identity with remarkable consistency. Odin famously sacrifices comfort and rest for knowledge. His endless wandering is tied to his refusal to remain still. Knowledge keeps him awake. In Jewish mystical tradition, the Watchers are beings who do not sleep because they're bound to observe humanity. Watching without rest leads to corruption. Even in later folklore, figures that cannot sleep are rarely heroic. They're guardians, cursed kings, or keepers of forbidden knowledge. Sleep represents integration. Wakefulness without rest represents fragmentation under strain. Across cultures, fractured beings tend to hold incompatible roles at once, experience disrupted rest or vigilance, and act as containers rather than participants. Sleep requires internal agreement. A unified self can rest, but a divided one must remain alert. When myth places power inside fractured figures, it almost always introduces a cost. The power isn't free, but it demands awareness without relief. This is why myths repeatedly separate identity into 3s rather than 2s. 2 collapses into opposition, 3 allows contradiction to persist. And when that contradiction is held inside a single body, sleep becomes a liability. And now we return to Whitebeard's death. If souls have weight, then the moment of death isn't symbolic, it's mechanical. The will loosens, the power seeks a new container. And for a brief window, the entire mass of that power is still bound to one place, the heart. Intervene at that moment, and you're not stealing an ability waiting to reincarnate, you're intercepting a soul mid-transfer. Eating the heart appears to be a ritualistic horror, but it's efficiency. Flesh to flesh, container to container, a transfer of weight before dispersion. That weight would crush anyone else, but Blackbeard's darkness doesn't reject weight, it demands it. The Yami Yami no Mi pulls inward, collapses space, and traps mass at its center. Once something falls in, it doesn't escape unchanged. So when Blackbeard consumed Whitebeard's heart, the power didn't tear him apart, it sank inwards. Whatever sits inside Blackbeard now isn't borrowed strength, it's a compressed will, held in by darkness and unable to leave. This all mirrors the philosophy of the real-world Blackbeard, Edward Teach, who cultivated terror by appearing monstrous and otherworldly. Smoke, fire, theatrical cruelty. He wanted people to believe he wasn't bound by the normal rules. Oda didn't just borrow the name, he borrowed the methods. Blackbeard wins by violating expectation, and doing what no one else would even consider. And the story never contradicts this either. No character calls it impossible, no rule explicitly forbids it. We're only shown the result. Which usually means the answer was already on screen. Blackbeard didn't inherit Whitebeard's power, he consumed it. And if devil fruits are born from desire and hunger, then the most dangerous devil fruit user isn't the one that eats the fruit. It's the one who eats the heart.
gosh, look at us all. We're a
Family.